lot of water up here. Well, good afternoon. We're going to get started now. Hopefully you have a lot of information to digest, and we're going to give you just a little bit more before closing out here today. So it's now my pleasure to welcome Dr. Carolyn Joy Dayton to the stage to deliver remarks. Dr. Dayton holds joint appointments at Wayne State School of Social Work and the Merrill Skillman Institute. She serves as the Associate Director of the Infant Mental Health Program at Merrill, where her developmental laboratory is located. Her research is focused on early parenting processes with an emphasis on fathering in urban settings. Her work highlights social-emotional development as an underpinning to ease in learning and development. I want to welcome you to the stage.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Those lights are bright. Thanks for sticking it out for the rest of the day. A little bit more and we can all go home. I don't know about you guys, but my head is very, very full of a lot of information. I think that as sort of I do this last talk and we kind of round out the day, we're going to narrow a little bit, right? So I'm the clinician in the group and I'm the scientist and the researcher, and so I'm going to talk a little bit more narrowly about some of these issues, and then we'll pull back out again. I'm also an infant mental health specialist, so the birth to 3 stuff is where my passion and expertise is. So we'll see how that maps on, and we'll hopefully as a group we'll kind of come to understand that a little more. I like being interactive, so raise your hand, shout things out, whatever it is. It'll make it a little more interesting. Everybody's probably sleepy right now, right? Post-lunch, everything. Oh, and I have a clicker. I'm going to do a couple slides. So one of my goals today is to sort of give you, from my perspective, some of the arguments for why early childcare, early care, early parenting is so important. I think that as a group, to some degree I'm preaching to the choir, obviously, but I think that as a group we need to think about how do we make these arguments? How do we convince people? What are the words that we can use that people will really be swayed to understand what we're talking about and understand the importance? So if I'm saying something and you have a better way to say it, please tell me what that is. It's a sort of shared process. I'm going to go through a couple slides and then we'll watch a very brief video, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So this piece of it is cost effectiveness, and not down to the dollar sign, right? Like I'm not an economist, but thinking about what's the argument for sensitive early care and why it's cost effective. So what I'm going to do, this is healthy development. This is a nice, wonderful, growing, flowering tree of a person or a little guy. This is when things don't go wrong. So what we're talking about here is developmental pathways, right? We all know what that means. And the thing about developmental pathways is once you take a few steps onto one, you're going in that direction. And the farther down you get, whether it's the healthy or the unhealthy, the harder it is to come back. So what does that look like? So if we think about things like healthy early care, home visiting programs, early education, there's a cost associated with that, and we've been talking about that today, right? The thing is that if we can shift, so if my first couple years at home have not been that great, and I get into a care program or I get into an infant mental health program, the dollar sign is just 1. What happens if I don't? And let's use the example of aggression. I've done a little bit of research in this area. What if you think about the life course of a person, let's just say the first 18 years, from birth to age 18 or 20, say. When are folks the most aggressive? When do we see the most aggressive behaviors? Birth to 20, where? 5 to 10, 3. Who thinks adolescence? A lay group, a lot of people think adolescents. It's 3. It's toddlers. You win the prize. Yes, that's right. Toddlers are very aggressive beings, right? They just are, any toddler. And they just don't know yet. Luckily, they're not very strong, and they're still really little. So we can kind of control them. But they hit and they punch, and they're aggressive little people. What happens for most kids is as language comes online, if language comes online, right, they can learn to control themselves. This is why we're forever saying, sometimes even to our teenagers, use your words, right? You can say you're angry, you just can't hit. They get that at 4, they don't get it at 2. So there's this developmental piece where most kids are pretty aggressive when they're toddlers. Most kids grow out of that. If they don't grow out of that, and the aggression stays and is a trait of them, becomes a trait of them, by the time they're in preschool, that's going to be it's hard. It's hard to shift folks, little kids, once the preschool piece is in place. So what we see from a scientific and a research perspective is when they get to be about 4 or 5 and they're aggressive, that's a stable trait across the life course. So once that happens, what are we looking at to make that better? A lot more money, right? Because now we're looking at foster care potentially, juvenile justice, wraparound services, those kinds of things. It takes a lot more to get them to walk from the pathway of not doing very well to the pathway of doing very well. And here we have, this is sort of the ACEs study right at the very top. When things have gone so bad during childhood for the bulk of your childhood, you end up with these entrenched patterns that are very, very, very difficult and very, very costly to change, right? The nice thing about developmental pathways, look at my fancy slides that aren't working right now, is the other thing is true as well. Resilience. Lay folks who aren't educated in early education and early childhood, think of resilience often as a quality of the kid that you're either born with it or you're not. Do you hear people say this? Right? Like as though it's temperament or something. That's not what resilience is, right? We build in resilience. That's how a child becomes resilient. How does a child become resilient? What do we do? From birth to 3? Well, boring stuff, really, right? We hug them and we love them and we hold them and we build in that social emotional competence that then becomes resilience. And when they are at that side, when they're on that developmental pathway, lucky for them, it's harder to shift, right? They're more sort of robustly able to go through the bumps in the road, the bumps in life, and still be okay, right? So that's the good news. I think that's it. Yes. Oops. Let's go back. I'm going to show you a video. It's a 2-minute video. It's free online. It's about the influence of violence on early development. I think for a lot of you, it's just going to be a review, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same side, because then I'm going to sort of talk about some research about physiology and the influence of violence on physiology. So if you can play it, that would be great.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
That's it. Quick. All right. So we all know that violence has this physiological effect, right? So this is a graphic that's sad and also poignant. Researchers, poverty and violence creates unhealthy toxic stress in Detroit children and in all kinds of children exposed to these kinds of things. As I was thinking about doing this talk today, I was thinking about my grandmother who passed about probably 6-7 years ago now, I think. I was pretty close to her. She was an immigrant. So I'm a product of immigration. Her parents came over. They were Belgian, and like other Belgians, they started to farm. So they went, whole groups of them. We still have a family farm actually out in Fowlerville in the family, and they were very, very, very poor. And so my grandmother used to say to me that she thought that all children should grow up poor because it taught her things about life. Now, she had food and she had a place to sleep, right? Poverty in that context was very different than it is for our kids now. Now, what poverty means almost always is that you're exposed to violence, and you're exposed to lots and lots of negative things, from toxins in the water to watching things that no 3-year-old should have to see, right? So it's a very different way of understanding what violence is. Okay, so poverty and violence disrupt healthy development. Early development, we all know, lays the foundation for all later development. Violence and poverty disrupt that. Early exposure sets children on what I was talking about before, these maladaptive developmental pathways, right? Further down the pathway, the more costly and the less effective the intervention. Here's some of the science on it, and it's very, very clear. There's no debate. There's no question. We know that violence exposure and poverty, which go together, and which go together in disproportionate ways towards children and families of color, is bad for the body, is bad for the mind. This is not in dispute. How do we know this? The human infant's brain is experience expectant and experience dependent. So when we're born, our brains are ready for all this input. And if we don't get it, what happens? Our brains don't function as they should, right? And they function in a way that protects us in whatever environment we're in. They're very adaptive, these brains of ours, and so they learn very quickly what they should do. Infants, toddlers, and young kids learn within the context of sensitive, caring, and consistent relationships. This is why plopping your kid in front of Sesame Street does not work, right? And they have to be consistent relationships. This came up in the panel that we just had on social emotional development. We understand this for adults, like we just take it for granted that we understand that relationships should be consistent. We don't always apply it to kids, right? Like somehow there's a disconnect. If I go home tonight and it's not my husband standing in the kitchen, it's some other dude, that's gonna matter to me. Right? Like and you might say to me, well, it's not your husband, but it's a husband. Well, no. But we do that for children. Well, your caretaker is gone today, but look, Sally's here and she's really nice too. No, that's not consistent caregiving. That's a problem. Okay, we all learn what we need to learn in order to survive. So you saw the video clip, and if I'm exposed to violence, and if my early world is such that I have to pay attention to keep myself safe, that's what's going to happen. That's how my brain is going to develop. It's going to be very, very good at keeping myself safe. I actually saw Letterman Letterman has this new series out, right? It's great. I love it. And he was talking to Jay-Z. I saw this like 2 or 3 nights ago. So he's doing this interview with Jay-Z, and Jay-Z is talking about how when he grew up, this social emotional stuff wasn't part of his world. He's now a father and trying to figure this all out. And what he said, one of the things he said is that, look, if a guy walks in up here in the 50th row of the theater, I'll look at him and I'll know, is he carrying a gun or not? Like, I have that down. I can figure that out. I know that instinctively because that was my environment, right? Knowing how to respond to my 4-year-old, knowing how to be a good husband, etc., not so much. I didn't learn those skills. I thought he said it better than any of us smarty pants people could ever say it. It was a great example. All right, if we want children to thrive, we have to invest in their early relationships. This is like, you can leave now if you, this is it. So like, this is the piece. So who are their early relationships? Their caregivers, their parents, their teachers. Judy said something, what did you say, Judy, in your talk, that we have to be thinking about children as not just cute and cuddly kids, and like, oh, they're so adorable, but their little brains are growing, well, it's even harder to think about parents as cute and cuddly, right? Like, I don't know how you all were when you were a parent of young children, some of you maybe still are, but I looked disheveled and I was grouchy all the damn time, right? Like, nobody thought I was cute and cuddly, and yet if we want to help little children, that's who we have to help, is their parents. Their parents are the ones who will determine what their life is like. Okay, so their parents, caretakers, teachers, and child and family friendly communities. So let's keep going. School readiness, I submit to you, is relationship readiness, right? Children learn within relationships. If they don't have strong and sensitive relationships, starting from the moments of birth, they are going to have problems. We heard in the last panel I was in, we heard a story about a 6-week-old baby who the biological parents had somehow broken its legs, not gotten him treatment. He was adopted at 6 weeks, still had a hard time. 6 weeks old, and those first weeks were formative in this little guy's future, his life, really. So young children learn when they feel safe and secure. Children feel safe and secure when they're cared for by consistent, caring adults. Same guy, same adult over and over again. To trust or not to trust, this is the question that children answer very, 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 very early, right? Their very earliest relationships. They are learning, is this world safe? Can I trust other people? That will translate to first grade when I can't figure out my math problem and I'm going to decide whether or not to ask for help from the teacher, right? Because I'm going to decide whether or not relationships are safe. And if they're not, I won't. And if they are, I will. Really fundamental stuff. Parents, too. Even though they're not soft and cuddly, they're very important. Here's the big point number 2, so now you can really leave if you've had it with this talk. Children are exposed to poverty and violence. Who do they have? They have parents who are exposed to poverty and violence, right? I parented one child. He's now 15 years old. I told you I was grouchy a lot when he was little. I mean, I was doing it in a very safe environment and with a lot of resources, with a lot of family, and it was really hard. If you're doing it while you're exposed to violence, how does one, when you're exposed to violence, what happens physiologically? Your cortisol goes up, your testosterone might go up, your whole system is ready to fight the bear or the person in the street, or whatever the stress is. How do you do that and then also goo-goo gaga with your little baby, right? Those are not consistent things. So if the parent is exposed to these stressors, it makes it very, very, very hard to sensitively care for their young children. I just said that. If we want to help young kids, we have to help their parents. We have to help their parents. The science is also clear. So here's some fun brain science. the parental brain is responsive to caretaking demands. So we know that for mothers and for fathers, those of you who have spent more than 20 seconds with me know I'm big into fathers, and I do fathering research. And it's true for both mothers and fathers that when you are preparing to parent your first child, your any child, when you're getting ready, you're about to have a baby, that mom's pregnant, that dad's there, it changes your biology, right? So we don't think about this for dads, but dads go through a biological reaction as well, right? Their oxytocin goes up as well. They also go through neurological changes. So James Swain at the University of Michigan, he's now at Stony Brook, did this really cool study where he looked at the brains of parents, mothers and fathers, first-time parents and then veteran parents, meaning they've had other children. And what he found was really interesting, and that is that in the first month or so, really early on, after the baby is born, the brains of parents, both mothers and fathers, look like OCD patients. Obsessive compulsive disorder, right? That's what their brains look like. He found this because he was studying actually OCD when he came upon this idea. And that makes sense, right? When you have a brand new baby and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, what if I drop him, right? Parents do this sort of naturally. They are naturally overly concerned. That Winnicott called it, preoccupation, normal postnatal preoccupation, something like that. I'm screwing it up. Where's Cheryl? Do you know the word? Do you remember the term? Anyway, so the notion is that you're a little bit crazy when you have a baby, right? You go a little crazy. You're supposed to because you have to protect this little baby. So it's true for mothers. It's also true for fathers. It's more true for mothers than it is for fathers. It's more true for first-time parents than it is for veteran or more than one, they've already had a baby parents, right? So he found this. And then guess what happens? He put them back in the MRI machine, in the magnet, and he found that, so this is their brains reacting to infant stimuli, I should have said that part, in the magnet, in the fMRI machine. And then he brought them back when the baby was 4 to 5 months of age, right? These guys are like 4 to 5 months, they're smiling, they're right, like you get to see a little of this stuff going on. And that was all gone, the OCD was gone, and it was the pleasure centers of the brain that are lighting up now in response to these baby cues, right? So there's a way in which as parents, we are physiologically sort of wired to have these things happen under normal circumstances. And our physiology supports early caretaking. It's different for moms and for dads. So imagine a 6-month-old baby is sitting on the living room floor and there's a toy just out of reach of the baby. What does the mom do? Grab it. Come on, people. Hand it to the baby, thank you. What does the dad do? The dad says, you can do it. Come on, man. You can get it. Go. Come on, come on, come on. Now, that's helpful, actually, because, again, in first grade, when I'm sitting at my little desk, my little first grader, and I can't figure out problems 1 through 3, I don't want to give up. I don't want to, right? Like this stuff that dads tend to do with little children is really, really important. It helps them continue on. What Ruth Feldman has found is that oxytocin, everybody knows oxytocin, right? The love hormone, when you're in love, when you're hugging, when you're breastfeeding, when you have a baby, oxytocin should be going up and it supports early parenting. What she found in moms versus dads is that for moms, when they're being soft and cuddly with their babies, their oxytocin goes up. For dads, when they're being active and playful with their babies, their oxytocin goes up. So it sort of supports different behaviors, but there's still this hormonal piece to what's going on in parenting. If you have questions, tell me. Violence and poverty exposure can hijack brains. Because how can you be soft and cuddly or playful, right, when you're defending yourself and your family and your children from violence? When you're thinking about, are the lights going to be turned off today or not? When you don't know if there's enough formula to get you through the week, right? That has an influence on how our brains function, and it's problematic to early parenting. Early interventions with parents, and this is a finding colleagues and I found, including James Swain at the University of Michigan, this mom power intervention that we did with violence-exposed mothers, so we did MRI scans pre and post the mom power intervention in the middle, it shifted their responses. It shifted their brain responses to infant stimuli. In that case, it was sounds of their infant and pictures of their infants. So that after the intervention, empathy, there were more brain structures that we know are associated with empathy that were reactive to their infant, right, after they went through this intervention. So working with parents works. They can change. We know they can change behaviorally. It turns out their physiology and their brain functioning can change as well. Cool stuff. Here's another group who aren't soft and cuddly. Teachers and caregivers, right? So if we are thinking about what's supporting early childhood, and we talked about this a lot in the social emotional panel, teachers and caregivers have to be supported as well in the work that they're doing. Working with kids who are exposed to poverty and violence is challenging, right? It can be tiring. Difficulty understanding, responding sensitively to challenging child behaviors and events that trigger our own histories. I say this all the time to my students at Wayne State, we're not electricians, we're not plumbers, right? We bring ourselves to our work, and that means that we're going to be triggered. If we're being open and honest and authentic and caring with the children that we're serving, we're going to be triggered some of the time. So we need places and spaces that we can go to reflect, to feel safe, to think through what was triggered in us when we were caring for children. And that's reflective functioning. That's reflective supervision. Vicarious trauma also happens, and the longer that you're working with folks who have been very, very, very traumatized, the more likely it is that you're going to have a vicarious trauma response. It looks very much like a trauma response often, so the symptoms tend to be the same. So again, having places and spaces where you can care for yourself that are trusting, that you feel like you're going to get your needs met are really, really important. Okay, a care plan for vulnerable families. So we heard a lot that, again, the sort of programmatic and the policy level we heard a lot of today. Teachers and caregiving professionals need what? They need reflective supervision, as I just described. They need training in trauma-informed care. Trauma Smart I have found to be a good one. There are other ones. They need caregiving support. Sorry. Ann Stacks at Wayne State University in conjunction with researchers at the University of Michigan, Kate Rosenblum and Maria Music, and Michigan State University have this new intervention that they're doing with teachers, actually. And it's very much like the mom power that we do with parents. And the idea is it trains professionals on how to work, on how to deal with, on how to understand difficult child behaviors and our reactions to them. Uh-oh. I'm going to start coughing. It's called Hearts and Minds on Babies. So we now have models for interventions that work. We know reflective functioning is, or we know reflective supervision is helpful. Hearts and Minds on Babies is looking to be helpful as well. It's an RCT, so it's still going. Parents, trauma-informed early interventions. So mom power is one of them. There are many of them. Infant mental health services tend to be trauma-informed. What do I mean by trauma-informed care? Everybody says this these days, right? What does it mean exactly? It just means understanding that trauma could be a part of the clinical picture. The best synopsis I've heard of it is asking the person who you are dealing with, not asking them what's wrong with you, asking them what has happened to you. What happened to you? What's going on? How are you, right? So rather than a blaming stance, we take a curiosity and an asking stance. Oh, sorry, guys. Home-based attachment-informed services like infant mental health programs that have been around forever and ever. Cheryl is involved, I believe, in the evaluation of the Michigan model infant mental health program. And attention and care from number one. And then what for parents? From an infant mental health, or what for kids, from an infant mental health perspective, see number one and number two. Because for birth to 3, you're looking at the relationship. You're looking at the parents, you're looking at the teachers, the caregivers. That's what everything else is funneled through. As they get older and have more executive functioning, et cetera, we start looking at the child a little bit more, and it's a gradual process. But we really need to be taking care of parents and teachers if we want to take care of kids. All right, strategies for change. This, by the way, comes from 0 to 3, and they did, you probably know about this. Yeah, they did like 3 states they took on as their, what, do you remember what they were, Judy?
3 states that they did this?
Yeah. You don't know. I want to say one of them was Oregon, but I don't hold me to that. They sort of worked with these professionals and policymakers within each of these 3 states and helped them to make the case for early childhood education. And here are the take-homes. Identify and engage stakeholders. Here we all are, and there are probably more of us elsewhere. Build consensus and pick our battles. This is a big piece, right? I asked this question when Matt was up because you have to have a uniform voice, and you have to decide what that's going to be. You can't be asking for 10 different things. It all gets sort of washed out. So picking your battles and deciding what your message is going to be. Educate the public and policymakers on things like clinical interventions, et cetera. Establish systems that help us sustain a focus. So this is the piece. How do we get this into place so it stays there? Easier said than done. Leveraging existing infrastructures. What do we already have that's working well? Judy talked a little bit about this in her talk this morning. And then I would say identify and leverage untapped resources. So what is it in your community? What is it in your state? What is it in your city that it could be used as a resource and we just haven't thought about it yet? I submit to you that fathers are an untapped resource, that fathers get ignored over and over again, and that they're out there and they want to be involved. In one of my first research studies, I had mothers and fathers who were expecting a baby, each in a different room. This is like the first finding of this study that I didn't even expect. Each doing the same interview in a room, the same interview about being a parent and having a baby and who they were as a parent and who the baby was going to be, right? Exact same interview. Did I say that yet? Guess who went longer? Fathers, by an hour. These poor pregnant mothers were sitting in the waiting room going, come on, man, be done already, right? I got to go to the bathroom again. So I think that what is happening is that nobody asks fathers about what they're thinking and what they're feeling. It doesn't occur to us that they're making internal representations of their baby, that they're struggling with their own issues. And these were violence and poverty exposed fathers, right? Lest you think that just because they are not earning a good living, they don't care. Not true. They had a lot to say. They had a lot of worries. One of my favorite quotes was this man who talked about his own history and not having a father and said, I've never done anything like this in my life. I'm going to be here for this baby. I've never done anything like this. And I want to tell you, I'm proud of myself for coming to this. Lest we think that they're not thinking and worried and really processing this new baby who's coming into their lives. This guy said it beautifully. So we need to tap fathers. We need to think about fathers in our intervention. We need to sort of put in place policies that help fathers be there. Guess what happens if you were a father and not living with the mother in your family, and you're paying child support, and you get a little bit behind, the first time actually, you get behind on your arrearages, on your child support payments, guess what happens? They pull your driver's license. At the point they pull your driver's license, how the heck are you supposed to go to work, right? Guess what happens when you get way behind on child support payments? First, they garnish your wages. Eventually, in Michigan, they arrest you, they charge you with a felony, and they imprison you. at which point we're now paying for you. You're of no use to your family. Your children are permanently or for however long without a father. The policies that we have around fatherhood in this state are really, really bad, and we really need to work to change them, in my view. That might not be one of your top 3 things, it's one of mine. At a very sort of basic level, engaging fathers. When I used to do home visits, I'll tell on myself, when I used to do home visits 20, 25 years ago, if the father would show up, I would be totally bummed. Like, I was there to work with a mother and a baby, not a father. What the heck was I supposed to do with the father, right? We've come a long way since then, but we are still not engaging fathers. When people talk about family, I heard a lot today, family, family, family. I bet you dollars to donuts that most of you were thinking about mothers and their children. We don't tend to think about fathers in this equation. And so we're leaving them out. In the city of Detroit, 79%, where I'm from, 79% of our births in Detroit are to unwed mothers. Well, the fathers are around, but we have to work to engage them if we want them to be involved, right? When you go to an ultrasound, if a mother goes to an ultrasound with grandma and dad, the ultrasound technician will talk to the mom, and she'll probably talk to grandma. Grandma, do you have any questions? Dad is left out. They don't ask dad questions. They don't engage him. He's sort of the 5th wheel in the room. So we need to figure out how to tap this untapped resource of fathers. That was my soapbox. I get a soapbox too, right? All right. So moving forward, I kept saying this as I thought about talking today and coming here today, and somebody else in the audience earlier today said, I've been to a lot of these, like, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of sort of good stuff being talked about, but what are we going to do tomorrow? We're all going to go home tonight and probably collapse because we're really tired, right? It's a long day. Tomorrow we need to wake up and actually do something. We can't let it stay here. We can't let this be it. So we need to figure out what it is we're going to do moving forward. How are we going to organize? What are the 3 things that we think are the most important things to do? And that's it. Thanks for listening. And do you guys have any questions? I'm happy to answer questions. Oh, here, can you bring her one too? They want to tell me what it is.
It's Indiana, Oregon, and Vermont.
Indiana, Oregon, and Vermont. I think they're taping this, so they wanted to know. And you have, yes.
My question is, how do we get fathers involved when we are in a field that has a hard time having men working in the classroom?
That's a really good point. How do we get fathers involved when we don't even want fathers in the classroom? Why don't we want fathers in the classroom?
Males in general, it's harder. It's harder. Well, there's that whole premise that, males will, molest and
Oh,
abuse the children.
right, because all men are sexual abusers. Everybody knows that, right?
You can't have them in the, infant or toddler because they might change a diaper.
Right. I don't know the answer to that. I think we need to figure that out, though. What it does, so attracting men to the field and being okay with it and allowing them to change a diaper, for heaven's sakes, is one piece of it. The other piece is, since it's all female, guess how the dad dude feels when he walks into the classroom, right? Like, my husband didn't want to go to our son's elementary school even, because he just didn't feel welcome. It was people like me, it was moms everywhere, right? So it's a big problem. The group that I see doing a better job with it is Head Start and Early Head Start. They seem to be, and maybe some of you are, they seem to be putting together curricula for dads that draws them in. Part of it is silly, cheap things, like putting posters on the wall that are pictures of dads and kids, right? Having magazines that aren't just whatever having whatever hunting magazines, or I don't know. See, I don't know. This is the problem. So yeah, making the environment dad friendly, I think, is the first piece of the answer. And other people might have examples too, or ideas too. Oh, okay. Hey, a dad, I think. Are you a dad?
And a grandfather.
A male person.
But I don't think it's because women or people are trying to keep men out of the teaching and caregiving thing. Most men have this that I know have a macho type syndrome. It's not man-like, like sports, like being a celebrity or being the leader of a community or something like that. You know, some men feel like it's inadequate to feel their masculinity if they do something that's feminine. So some of that is keeping men out, not just women. But I think our society as a whole need to turn our perspective around from what we've been used to since the caveman days about, you know, me, Tarzan, you, Jane, and that type of stuff. We're going to have to realize that we are all really the same, whether we are tall, short, or we're a man or a woman. And when it comes down to what is really important in society, we're equal. But we are different. I am a man. My wife is a woman. So I can't expect her to be a man. And she can't expect me to be a woman. But when it comes to our children, they need to see equalness in there so that they know that being a woman is important as well as being a man is important. I've always gotten tired, and I'm talking a lot.
You can talk all you
or
want.
seeing the TV programs where the football star, hi, Mom, hardly ever says hi, Dad. Or someone don't even know who Dad is.
Yeah, that's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
so I'm glad to see that there's more men and there's more young men that want to be in the picture with their children.
Yeah.
And I think we need to continue to encourage that until it becomes part of our society instead of some kind of gemstone that we see and say, wow, we admire that. Well, I think we can add to that by encouraging young people, you know, and I like the way the young kids about this gun control are saying, we got to take control.
Yeah, that's
well, they're right.
That's right.
So far, it seems like us grown-ups haven't been taking too good control of a lot of stuff in society.
They're taking
And
over for us, yeah.
It is the young people that should do this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
Didn't
for
mean to
your
interrupt
thoughts.
you.
I totally agree, and I think part of, if I can paraphrase, so tell me if this is right. There's a tension between having equality and also, for couples who want it, honoring gender roles, right? That if that's how you want your relation, and so not everybody does, and I get that, but if you do, then honoring your gender roles and having equality and saying, yeah, man, you can hold a baby, you can hold it in a masculine kind of way if you want, you know? I don't know what that looks like, but there's probably a way, right? So there's a way that you can do it that's going to be okay and that you're going to feel okay with. Is that right?
Somewhat.
What part did I get wrong?
No, you didn't get wrong. How else you going to hold a baby but hold a baby? There is no male or female way to hold a baby.
I like that. Good job. Yeah.
Just hold the baby. But it's what
Anybody.
you have in your heart that counts.
Yeah, it's what you have in your heart that
So I
counts.
think we can go back to teaching people, and I believe in the Bible, love is the #1 important ingredient.
Yeah.
A father can do that too besides a mother.
A father can love? Are you sure?
Oh, yeah.
Right, that's
He
right.
can
That's
do that
exactly
too,
right.
Not just mom.
Yeah, thank you. That might be a good place to end, but do we have other questions that I can? Uh-huh. Over here, can we have a? They're going to say they won't capture you in the.
I just have two comments about the male involvement or men in early childhood programs. We know that education overall is a female-dominated profession, and so part of getting males involved is to have males also part of early childhood programs. And it's actually a sign of high-quality programs when they employ males.
Yeah.
So when you employ males, then the men, who are the fathers, the uncles, the grandfathers, the boyfriends, whoever, when they see men represented in the programs,
Yeah.
they're more likely to come.
Yeah, that's
and they can be
absolutely right.
volunteers as well. And so I think part of it is opening the door for them to feel welcomed. As the gentleman said, they have to be welcomed without all of the judgment that we have about males in this society.
Absolutely true. Hard to do, hard to recruit men into these positions, but absolutely true. And then into the profession, we should be doing that. Into the profession, that's right. That's right. That was a good comment. Thanks. Yep.
To your point about home visitation and the man being there, it also happens a lot when the teacher calls and dad answers the phone and mom says, and the teacher says, "Can I talk to mom? Is mom there?"
Yeah, rather.
As opposed to talking to dad.
Yeah.
And then to his point, fathers and mothers do parent a little bit different. Men throw babies up in the air.
And women
And not
stand
a lot
going,
of mothers
"No."
do that. Right.
Yeah,
right. So
totally.
That's
right.
a difference there.
Yeah, I just want to say, and it's really important. That is how it plays out, right? Dad is like, and the mom's like, "No, be careful." Right. It's a good thing to do, actually, to throw that baby in the air. What men do is they get babies and young children very jazzed up, and then they make them calm down. Guess what that teaches them? Regulation, right? Guess what they're going to need when they go to school? Regulation. So when we exclude dads, we exclude this piece that they actually do really, really well. Yeah.
Hi, I have a comment for you. I'm with the Genesee County Health Department. We have a Healthy Start program in our community, and we have a very strong fatherhood program as part of that. And we have an amazing advocate in Genesee County. His name is Sean Hart. He offers parenting classes and support and a support network for dads. So if anyone's interested in that or wants more information, you can call us at the health department and we'll connect you.
Awesome. Genesee County, you said, right? Thank you. I'm done, aren't I? I'm done. Thank you. Thank you.
You're okay?
I'm good, yeah.
We need you to be our champion and let them know. Dr. Mona said earlier in the session, I heard, that we're building minds. That's what we're doing, right? So this is high-tech work here. It's not just holding babies. So as we close and transition to our final remarks, I want to first remind you of something you'll see on your table, which is, again, a question. And Carol said, what do we do tomorrow? What's our next steps? Right, so we're asking you that very specific question. And if you would take the time to fill this out and turn it in before you leave, we want to know, based on the information that you received today, are there thoughts that generate action for you and what those things might be? So I would like to also take time to thank all of you for participating and joining us here today, and to thank all of our collaborating partners and staff who worked diligently to make this day happen. Thank you to our guest speakers and our panelists for illuminating best and necessary practices. And last but not least, I would like to thank the University of Michigan and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation for its sponsorship of today's Rise Together Early Childhood Policy Summit. Now, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce Billy Deville to the stage. Billy's daughter, Brooke, attends Michigan-Flint, and she's going to share a little bit about that. Billy is a parent advocate and a youth developer. In addition to raising 4 children, she also runs Worthy Girl, a youth development organization designed to connect girls ages 8 to 14 to life skills. As we were preparing for today, I told Billy, you have the last word, so I want you to make it count. And so now, let me bring Billy to the stage so she can let you know how you might support young children and families to meet the needs of families. Billy?
Thank you, Ms. Denise. As she stated, I am Billy Deville, and I am actually the lead parent ambassador at Michigan-Flint. I first want to say thank you for having me, and I want to thank you all for being active participants in implementing early childhood education. Now, I asked parents, what does early childhood education mean to you? And I received similar answers across the board from parents. Those responses were, my child being in school has afforded me the opportunity to go back to school and complete my degree, or my child being in school has afforded me the opportunity to return to the workforce. Many parents don't have the advantage of having someone care for their child at 8 in the morning until 5 p.m. So what Educare has done is open its doors from 7:30 a.m. until 5:30 p.m., and that allows parents to go and earn a living to support their family or go and complete college credit so that they can earn that degree. For me, it has afforded me not only the opportunity to pick up extra shifts at work, because I worked the night shift, because before Educare was even a factor in my life, that was the only opportunity for me to earn a living. But now, when my daughter is at Educare, I can pick up extra shifts at work, and it has afforded me the opportunity to start my own program in youth development, and it actually has allowed me to be engaged in my community. Like today, I'm able to be here because she's there. If I had her here now, it wouldn't happen. So, so imagine how much of a blessing it is to have a program where my child is able to not only develop cognitively and socially, etc., but as a parent, I am asked, what are your personal goals? What are your family goals? And I remember when my son, he first entered into early education, one of my goals was to buy a home. And the teacher asked me this then too, even before Educare, and I actually met that goal. So to have someone genuinely interested in my family and not just my toddler because they're a part of their program has been a great initiative and a great incentive of being a part of early education programs for us. I remember recently just walking into my daughter's classroom at Educare, and I heard the teacher saying to another student, "I'm going to wash your coat." And I remember thinking to myself, like, we may not know what that may mean to that child's parent. You don't know if they have a washer and dryer at home. You don't know if they have means of transportation to go to the laundromat. They may not even have money to wash for that week. So you just don't know how much little things, that education programs and teachers, that the little things that they do, how much it may mean to a family. I'll leave with this. When my daughter entered into Educare, I was trying to potty train her, and I guess because I'm mom, she wasn't taking me serious. She just wasn't cooperating with me. And not even 2 months into her being at Educare, she was potty trained. And so to have her lead teacher, her assistant teacher, and her classroom aide, all three committed to helping me potty train her because I was struggling with that, it's a great benefit for my family all around. And I just want to leave and say that early childhood education is not just about the child, it's about the family structure. And when we build up children, we build up communities, and that is exactly what we need, especially in the Flint community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you all for coming. Enjoy your evening.